Sarah had always prided herself on being a reliable employee. For the past 8 years, she'd been working tirelessly as an event coordinator for a high-profile company. She loved the chaos of it all, managing large events, handling VIPs, ensuring everything went off without a hitch. It was a job that kept her on her toes, but she thrived in that environment. Everything in her life seemed to be in perfect balance. Or so she thought. It was a Tuesday morning when Sarah's world suddenly started to unravel. She had just returned from a long weekend off, rejuvenated and ready to dive into her next big event, the launch of a new product for a top-tier sponsor. The day was filled with the usual buzz of last-minute changes, phone calls, and meetings. Sarah had been assigned to oversee the operations for the VIP section of the event. This wasn't just any ordinary event, it featured Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of the most popular celebrities in the world. Having worked with high-profile clients before, Sarah was used to the pressure, but this felt different. This event had a certain energy in the air. As Sarah entered the conference room to meet with the team, the atmosphere was tense. Her boss, Greg, was pacing back and forth, an ominous sign that something wasn't right. "Sarah, we need to talk," Greg said, his voice stern, not the usual friendly tone he used. "Sure, Greg, what's going on?" she asked, trying to remain calm. He motioned for her to sit. Sarah hesitated but took a seat, trying to read his expression. Greg rarely looked this stressed. "There's been a situation," Greg began, his eyes avoiding hers. "You did a great job on the VIP section last night, but the higher-ups are unhappy about something." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What happened?" she asked, her heart racing. You stepped out of line, Sarah. Helping Dwayne Johnson during the technical glitch last night, that was not part of your job. You should have just informed the team and let them handle it. Not jump in yourself." Sarah blinked in confusion. But he was about to go on stage, and there was no one else around who could fix it in time. The glitch would have ruined the whole event. He asked for help, and I did what was needed to save the moment. Greg exhaled sharply, his gaze hardening. "You're not getting it, Sarah. You're not just helping him as a professional, you're taking risks. You bypassed protocol, and that's not how things work around here. We can't have that kind of behavior." Her mind raced. Sarah was good at her job. She had always known when to step in and when to stay in the background. She had saved the day, helped the event run smoothly, and now she was being reprimanded for it. It made no sense. "Wait," Sarah said, trying to grasp the situation. "Are you seriously saying I did the wrong thing by helping him? By preventing the show from being a disaster?" Greg crossed his arms, his tone cold. "Yes, Sarah. You've jeopardized the company's reputation. Dwayne Johnson is a major brand, and the way you handled it could have been misinterpreted. You can't just act on impulse. You should have let the higher-ups take control." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't happening. She had put in so much effort, worked countless late nights, and now she was being penalized for doing what anyone would have done in that situation. Something was off. "I was trying to help," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you were. But you need to understand, the higher-ups aren't going to tolerate this kind of behavior. You've put us in a very difficult position." The weight of the words hit her like a ton of bricks. "So, what now? Are you firing me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Greg didn't answer right away, and that silence spoke volumes. He finally spoke, his voice softer but still firm. "Not yet. But we're going to have to make some changes. For now, I'm giving you a warning. You'll be reassigned to a smaller event. No more major responsibilities for you, Sarah." "I'm sorry." Sarah's mind was reeling. How could this be happening? She had always played by the rules, followed the company's procedures, but now she was being punished for making a decision in the heat of the moment, one that had ultimately saved the event. Before she could respond, Greg stood up and left the room, leaving Sarah to sit there, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under her. The next few days were a blur. Sarah couldn't focus at work. The sting of Greg's words haunted her. How could a decision that had seemed so right at the time have turned into a career-threatening mistake? She kept replaying that moment in her head, standing next to Dwayne Johnson, making sure everything was okay before he went on stage. She never thought for a second that it would come back to haunt her. And then it hit her, what if it wasn't just about the glitch? What if there was more to it? She tried to push the thought out of her mind, but it wouldn't go away. Sarah had a gut feeling that something wasn't adding up. Why had she been singled out when there were so many people working the event? Why had Greg been so quick to blame her, even when it was clear she had been trying to save the situation? But Sarah wasn't one to back down easily. She had faced challenges before and always found a way to overcome them. But this time, it felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being targeted. And then, just as she was lost in thought, an unexpected email popped up in her inbox. The subject line read, "A thank you from Dwayne Johnson." Sarah hesitated before clicking it open. The message was simple, but it caught her completely off guard. "Hey Sarah, I just wanted to personally thank you for your help during the event. I know it wasn't part of your job description, but you stepped up when no one else did. That's the kind of person I respect. Hope to work with you again soon. Dwayne Johnson." Sarah stared at the screen in disbelief. This was it. She had helped one of the most famous men on the planet, and now her career was on the line. Was it worth it? She didn't know yet, but something told her this wasn't the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah Thompson wasn't the type of person who gave up easily. But she wasn't always this way. The tenacity, the drive, the sense of resilience she had built over the years, it wasn't something she was born with. It had come from years of battling through her own personal storms, surviving struggles, and, most importantly, learning to stand tall no matter how many times life knocked her down. Sarah grew up in a modest neighborhood in Chicago. Her parents worked hard but were often stretched thin, juggling jobs to make ends meet. Her father worked at a factory, while her mother worked long hours as a nurse. They both loved Sarah dearly, but there was never much time for luxuries or bonding moments. What they did offer was support, an unwavering belief that she could be whatever she wanted, as long as she was willing to work for it. As a young girl, Sarah was quiet, observant, and always curious. She had big dreams, but the idea of chasing them seemed like a luxury. Her school life wasn't easy, either. She wasn't the most popular girl in class, nor was she the athletic star. She was just there. She learned early that in order to be noticed, she had to make herself valuable. She wasn't the type to sit back and let things happen, she always had to take control. Her life started to change during her senior year of high school. Sarah found herself drawn to organizing school events, homecoming, dances, fundraisers. It wasn't long before her friends and teachers started noticing her leadership abilities. The thrill of pulling everything together, getting all the little details right, was something Sarah had never felt before. It wasn't about the applause, it was about the satisfaction of seeing a plan come together flawlessly. It felt like she was doing something meaningful. When Sarah graduated, she didn't have the luxury of attending an Ivy League school like some of her classmates. But that didn't matter to her. She had a different path in mind. She went to a local college, working part-time at a cafe to cover tuition. Her major? Communications, with a focus on event management. It was her ticket to the world she'd always dreamed of, big events, high-profile clients, and the adrenaline rush of pulling off something extraordinary. By the time Sarah graduated college, she had already lined up her first job as an assistant event coordinator at one of the top event management companies in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous at first. She started as a grunt, doing whatever needed to be done behind the scenes. But that was how she liked it, working her way up, proving her worth. And prove it, she did. Within 3 years, Sarah had become one of the company's most trusted event coordinators. She worked on everything from charity galas to corporate conferences, from product launches to weddings. Sarah's knack for organization, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and her innate understanding of what people wanted in an event made her stand out. Her reputation started to grow beyond just her company. Word spread, and soon enough, Sarah was dealing with high-profile clients, the very same clients she had once dreamed of working for. But with success came its own set of challenges. The demands of the job became more intense. Her work-life balance teetered on the edge of non-existence. Sarah found herself working long hours, sacrificing weekends, and missing important family gatherings. She knew what she was doing was important, but sometimes, it felt like she was giving up too much of herself. Her relationships started to suffer. Her best friend, Emma, had been there through thick and thin, but as Sarah's job took more of her time, they grew apart. Emma would call her, only to hear Sarah's voice crackling with exhaustion as she rushed to finish another task. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," Emma would say. "You're missing out on life. You've got to slow down." But Sarah didn't know how to slow down. She had this unshakable belief that if she didn't keep pushing, she'd lose everything she had worked for. Her career was her identity. Without it, she wasn't sure who she would be. She had to keep moving forward, even if it meant sacrificing her personal life in the process. Then there was her family, especially her mother. Sarah's mom was her rock. She had been through so much to support her, and Sarah didn't want to disappoint her. Every time Sarah spoke to her mother, it was a reminder of how much she had sacrificed to get where she was. Her mother always encouraged her to follow her dreams, but Sarah couldn't help but feel guilty. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm just so busy." "I'll visit soon," Sarah would say, but she knew the words felt hollow. It was during this time that Sarah started to feel a shift in herself. She didn't know if it was the constant stress or the feeling of being constantly on edge, but she began questioning everything. Was this really worth it? Was success worth the price she was paying? It wasn't until her boss, Greg, gave her that cryptic warning after the Dwayne Johnson event that the floodgates truly opened. As Sarah replayed her past decisions in her mind, she started wondering if she had made the wrong choices. Had her relentless pursuit of success caused her to overlook the things that truly mattered? She could still hear Greg's voice echoing in her head, "You've jeopardized the company's reputation. You can't just act on impulse." Those words stung, but they also served as a wake-up call. Sarah wasn't just working to be successful anymore, she was working to prove something. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure what that was. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sarah. She tried to keep a cool exterior, pushing through her workdays, attending meetings, and completing her tasks with the same level of professionalism that had earned her praise in the past. But beneath the surface, everything felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that her career, once a source of pride and purpose, was on the brink of collapse. The tension between her and Greg was palpable. He had already made it clear that her future at the company was hanging by a thread, and every passing day only seemed to confirm his warning. Sarah had been relegated to smaller events that didn't require the skill or the responsibility she was accustomed to handling. She was given minimal tasks, and her role felt more like a placeholder than a valued member of the team. The message was clear: she was no longer trusted. But Sarah couldn't let it go. Every time she walked into the office, she was met with a cold, almost indifferent reception. Her colleagues, once friendly, now seemed distant. There were whispered conversations behind closed doors, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they were talking about her. She had always been the one others turned to for help, the one who could handle anything, but now she felt like an outsider, a shadow of her former self. And then, there was the issue with Dwayne Johnson. After the event, the media had picked up on the story of how he had been helped by a mysterious event coordinator when things went wrong. The story spread quickly, and the spotlight was suddenly on Sarah. She hadn't sought out the attention, but it had found her nonetheless. It wasn't just the company that was keeping their distance. Dwayne's team had sent a thank you note, but there was no word on whether he had recommended her for future work, no follow-up from his camp. Sarah had hoped for more, maybe an offer to work on a bigger project, but there was nothing. She had helped him, and in the end, all it had gotten her was a warning from her boss. Maybe I made a mistake, Sarah thought to herself as she sat at her desk, staring at the email. Maybe I should have just stepped back and let things fall apart. Maybe it's better not to care. But deep down, she knew that wasn't who she was. Sarah had always prided herself on being someone who took charge, who faced challenges head-on and found solutions. Giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Her mind kept returning to one thought: what if this was just the beginning of something bigger? What if there was a way to turn this situation around and prove that helping Dwayne Johnson hadn't been a mistake, but rather the defining moment of her career? Late one evening, after another long day, Sarah was sitting in her apartment when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma, her best friend. "Emma, hey, I've been thinking about you. We need to catch up. When can I see you?" Sarah smiled. She hadn't seen Emma in weeks, and though they spoke occasionally, their once constant friendship had been pushed aside due to Sarah's hectic schedule. Emma had always been there for her, the steady anchor when Sarah's life seemed like it was constantly in motion. Sarah missed that. "Sarah, how about tomorrow? I need a break from all of this." "Emma, yes. Let's grab dinner. I've got so much to tell you." It was a small moment of relief, but it was enough to spark a little hope in Sarah's heart. Maybe talking things through with someone who truly understood her would give her the clarity she needed. She grabbed her purse and made her way to the cafe they had always loved, a small, cozy place with brick walls and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. The next evening, Sarah arrived at the cafe, her mind still swirling with questions about her future. As soon as she saw Emma, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. Emma was sitting at their usual booth, a cup of tea in front of her, her eyes lighting up when she saw Sarah walk in. "Sarah. You look exhausted. How are you holding up?" Emma asked, concern evident in her voice. Sarah slid into the booth across from her, the weight of the past few days making her shoulders feel heavy. "Honestly, I don't know anymore, Emma. It's like everything I've worked for is slipping through my fingers. I helped Dwayne Johnson, and now my career is in jeopardy." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Wait, what? You helped The Rock? Like, the Dwayne Johnson?" Sarah nodded, her voice thick with frustration. "Yeah, but no one seems to care. My boss gave me a warning, and now I'm stuck doing small events. I thought I was doing the right thing, but all I've done is ruin my career." Emma paused, her gaze thoughtful. "Sarah, I know you're hurting right now, but I don't think you've ruined anything. You did what anyone would have done. You stepped up when things went wrong, and you saved the event. You didn't just help Dwayne, you helped everyone in that room. And now, the company's mad at you for it. That's messed up." Sarah felt a slight flicker of hope at her words, but she was still uncertain. "I don't know, Em. I feel like I've burned bridges. Greg's mad at me, and I don't know if I can come back from this." "Have you tried talking to him?" Emma asked, leaning forward. "You're good at this. You can fix this. You're not the kind of person who just gives up." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know if it's even worth it. What if he's already made up his mind? What if I'm just done?" Emma shook her head. "You've always been someone who finds a way to make things right. Don't let this situation define you. There's always a way out, Sarah. You just need to see it. The conversation lingered in the air, the words sinking deep into Sarah's heart. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in days, she felt like there was a possibility of hope. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a new sense of resolve. She wasn't going to let her career slip away. She had fought too hard to get where she was. There had to be a way to fix this. And if she couldn't fix it from within, maybe it was time to seek a new path, a path where her skills and heart would finally be recognized. But before she could make any decisions, one thing was certain: she wasn't going down without a fight. Sarah woke up early the next morning, the crisp light of dawn filtering through her curtains. The thought of sitting in her apartment, waiting for the inevitable downfall of her career, wasn't an option anymore. She had always believed that when the universe throws you a curveball, it's up to you to decide whether you strike out or hit a home run. Today, Sarah was determined to hit that home run, no matter how hard she had to swing. She grabbed a quick breakfast, threw on a simple blazer, and pulled her hair into a tight ponytail. The morning felt different, she felt different. For the first time in a while, she was focused, driven, and ready to take control of her future. She wasn't going to let one mistake, or what seemed like one mistake, define her. She had worked too hard to get this far. When Sarah arrived at the office, the energy in the building was palpable. The air felt thicker than usual, like there was an unspoken tension hanging over everyone. As she walked past the desks of her colleagues, she could feel their eyes on her, but no one said a word. The quiet was deafening. The walls felt like they were closing in, but she pushed forward, determined to face whatever came next. She made her way straight to Greg's office, her heart pounding in her chest. The door was closed, and she paused for a brief moment, collecting her thoughts before knocking. "Come in," came Greg's voice from the other side of the door. His tone was cold, and Sarah braced herself for the confrontation. She entered the office, standing tall as Greg looked up from his desk. He didn't seem surprised to see her, but his expression was unreadable. His usual sharp gaze seemed to pierce through her, but Sarah refused to break. "Greg," she began, her voice steady but with a touch of urgency. "I need to talk to you about what happened with the Dwayne Johnson event. I don't think you fully understand the situation, and I want to clear things up." Greg didn't immediately respond. He just sat back in his chair, arms crossed, giving Sarah the time to continue, but with an air of detachment. He was in control, and she was trying to take it from him. "I helped Dwayne Johnson because the event was in trouble," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I did what I had to do, and I did it well. The event went off without a hitch, and everyone was happy. Yes, it wasn't part of the original plan, but I had no other choice." Greg's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt her. Sarah pressed on, her voice now brimming with emotion. "I know you're upset because I didn't follow protocol. But if I hadn't stepped up, the event could have been a disaster. I didn't act on impulse, I acted on instinct. And that's what makes me good at what I do, Greg." There was a long pause. Sarah could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about the event anymore, this was about her career, her future, and her sense of self-worth. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was asking for understanding. Finally, Greg sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. "Sarah, I get that you think you did the right thing. But you can't just throw caution to the wind every time something goes wrong. Our clients expect professionalism, a carefully planned approach. You jeopardized that. You risked our reputation by going rogue." Sarah's pulse quickened. She had known this conversation would be difficult, but she hadn't expected him to be so dismissive of her actions. She took a deep breath and steadied herself before speaking again. "I didn't go rogue, Greg. I went above and beyond. And if that's not the kind of person you want running your events, then maybe I don't belong here. But if you give me another chance, I'll show you that I can do it the right way." I'll prove to you that I'm not a liability, I'm an asset. Greg's gaze softened, just for a moment. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes. She had caught his attention. Okay, Sarah. I'll give you one more shot. But this is your last chance. Don't make me regret it. The words hit her like a wave crashing over her. She had done it, she had convinced Greg to give her a chance. It wasn't going to be easy, but she wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. Thank you, Greg. You won't regret it, she said, her voice unwavering. The next few weeks were a blur of intense work. Sarah was given a new assignment, a large, high-profile corporate gala that would be attended by some of the city's most influential figures. The stakes were higher than ever, and Sarah knew this was her moment to prove that she could handle the pressure. She threw herself into the planning, pouring every ounce of energy into every detail. The planning stages were challenging, but Sarah's determination kept her focused. She worked long hours, often staying in the office late into the night, perfecting every aspect of the event. She was determined not to make the same mistakes again. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing the guest list, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Dwayne Johnson's team, thanking her once again for her help during the event. She smiled as she read the words, "Your professionalism and quick thinking saved the day." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to her. Maybe she hadn't ruined everything after all. As the night of the gala approached, Sarah began to feel the pressure building. Every detail had to be flawless. The venue had to be perfect. The lighting, the decor, the music, all of it had to come together seamlessly. She worked tirelessly, coordinating with vendors, making last-minute adjustments, and ensuring that everything was set. The night of the event arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The guests began arriving, the grand ballroom filled with the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. The decor was breathtaking, and the event flowed smoothly, just as Sarah had envisioned. As the night progressed, Sarah watched from the back of the room, a sense of pride swelling within her. She had done it. Everything was falling into place. And then, just as the evening was reaching its peak, disaster struck. The sound system malfunctioned, and the entire room fell into an eerie silence. The music stopped. The speakers hummed loudly, but nothing came out. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She didn't panic. She had been through worse. She grabbed her walkie-talkie, quickly briefing her team on the situation. Within minutes, the issue was resolved, and the music returned, smoothly transitioning back into the playlist. The room buzzed again with excitement, the guests unaware of the near crisis. As Sarah took a breath, she realized something. This was the test. This was the moment that would prove whether she had truly learned from her past mistakes. She had handled the situation, remained calm under pressure, and kept the event going without missing a beat. The rest of the night went off without a hitch. By the end of the evening, the event was hailed as one of the most successful the company had ever hosted. Sarah had done it, she had not only redeemed herself but had elevated her reputation to new heights. The following week, after the successful gala, things began to shift for Sarah. Her reputation within the company had turned around almost overnight. Greg, who had been distant and skeptical just a few weeks earlier, now approached her with a new level of respect. Her colleagues, once indifferent or cautious, were starting to engage with her again. Sarah was finally feeling like she had regained some of the ground she had lost in the aftermath of the Dwayne Johnson incident. It wasn't just about her work performance anymore. People were beginning to see her as more than just a competent coordinator, they saw her as someone who could handle the pressure, someone who could think on her feet and solve problems when the stakes were high. It was a feeling of vindication, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to bask in it. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, a call came that threatened to unravel everything. It was from Dwayne Johnson's personal assistant. "Sarah, this is Claire. I'm reaching out on behalf of Mr. Johnson. He wanted to personally thank you again for your help during the gala. He was impressed by how you handled the crisis with the sound system. We'd like to offer you a position on his upcoming charity event, and if you're available, he'd like you to meet with us next week. The words hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. She had never imagined that helping Dwayne Johnson that night would lead to something like this. A charity event, a position with his team. This could be the break she had been hoping for. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she struggled to grasp the full weight of what was happening. Of course, I'm available, Sarah finally managed, trying to keep her voice steady. I'd be honored to meet with you both. Perfect, Claire said, her voice warm and professional. We'll send you the details. Mr. Johnson is looking forward to it. Sarah hung up the phone, her hands trembling. She couldn't believe it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the one that could redefine her career. But it was also terrifying. It meant stepping into a world that was larger than anything she had ever known. It meant moving beyond the safety of her current role into something unknown, into something that could either elevate her or break her. That night, Sarah lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. The phone call had ignited something deep within her, a mix of excitement and fear. She had always dreamed of being a part of something bigger, but was she truly ready for it? What if she failed? What if she couldn't meet the expectations of someone like Dwayne Johnson? But then, she thought about everything she had already overcome, the struggles, the self-doubt, the mistakes, and she realized something important. She had already faced failure. She had already faced the worst-case scenario. And here she was, standing taller than ever. Whatever happens, I'll give it everything I've got, she whispered to herself, her resolve hardening. As Sarah walked into the sleek, modern office building where the meeting was scheduled, her nerves began to creep in. She had worked with plenty of clients before, but none of them had the presence of someone like Dwayne Johnson. He was a global superstar, a household name. The pressure was immense, but Sarah pushed those thoughts aside. This was her moment. She had earned the right to be here. She was escorted into a spacious conference room, where Dwayne's team was already seated. Claire, his assistant, greeted her with a warm smile, and beside her sat two other people, a public relations specialist and a logistics coordinator. Sarah shook hands with each of them, but her eyes kept darting to the door, waiting for the moment when Dwayne himself would walk in. And then, as if on cue, the door opened, and there he was, Dwayne Johnson. He was everything Sarah had imagined, larger than life, confident, and with a magnetic energy that filled the room. He was dressed casually, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, but there was an undeniable sense of authority in the way he carried himself. Sarah, it's great to finally meet you in person, Dwayne said, offering her a handshake. His grip was firm, his eyes locking onto hers in a way that felt both professional and warm. Mr. Johnson, it's an honor, Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm really excited to be here. They all took their seats, and for the next hour, the conversation flowed easily. Dwayne and his team were warm, engaged, and clearly invested in the charity event. As Sarah contributed her ideas and thoughts on how to bring the event to life, she realized that she wasn't just impressing them with her knowledge or experience. She was impressing them with her passion, her drive, and her willingness to put in the hard work that this event would require. The meeting ended on a high note, with Dwayne thanking Sarah for her ideas and telling her that they would be in touch soon to finalize the details. As Sarah left the meeting, her mind was spinning. She had done it, she had impressed them, especially Dwayne himself. She felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, but also a deep sense of uncertainty. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but it was also the moment that would define the next phase of her career. What would happen if she joined Dwayne Johnson's team? Could she handle the immense pressure that would come with working for one of the most famous people in the world? But in the back of her mind, she knew the answer. She had been fighting for this opportunity for so long, and now it was within her reach. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back. This was her chance to step into a new world, a world that she had always dreamed of. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. It had been a week since the meeting with Dwayne Johnson's team. Sarah had heard nothing but radio silence. At first, the quiet gave her hope. They were taking their time to make a decision, considering everything carefully. But as the days dragged on, that hope began to erode, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. Was she not what they were looking for? Had she said something wrong during the meeting? It wasn't like her to doubt herself, but this was different. This wasn't just another event or client, this was a game changer. On the 8th day, her phone rang just as she was finishing up a conference call at work. The name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. It was Claire from Dwayne's team. "Hi, Sarah. It's Claire. How are you?" Her voice was bright, but Sarah could hear the underlying tone of business. She tried to steady her breath before answering. "I'm doing well, thanks for asking. How about you?" "Doing great," Claire replied, a slight pause hanging between her words. "So, I wanted to follow up with you regarding the charity event. We were all really impressed by your ideas and your approach, and after careful consideration, we'd love to offer you a position on the event planning team. You'll be working closely with us, bringing your expertise into the fold and helping us create something really special." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She blinked hard, almost as if to make sure she was hearing correctly. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was finally here, the reality was almost too much to take in. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice catching. "I'm absolutely serious," Claire confirmed with a chuckle. "You've got the job, Sarah. We'd be thrilled to have you on board." The rush of emotions that hit Sarah in that moment was overwhelming. Elation. Relief. Gratitude. But underneath it all, there was also a sense of disbelief. She had done it. She had made it. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. I won't let you down," Sarah stammered, her voice filled with genuine excitement. "I know you won't," Claire said warmly. "We'll send you the details later today. Let's get started as soon as possible." After the call ended, Sarah sat at her desk, a huge grin spreading across her face. She had been handed the opportunity of a lifetime, one that most people only dreamed of. But now that she had it, the weight of it all began to sink in. This was no longer just about her career or her pride, it was about a chance to be part of something bigger than she had ever imagined. She was about to work with Dwayne Johnson, helping to shape his charity event, contributing to something that could make a difference in the world. She was going to be a part of something that mattered. The transition to working with Dwayne's team was seamless, though it came with its own set of challenges. Sarah was thrust into high-profile meetings, coordinating with top-tier vendors, and collaborating with people whose names she had only ever seen on TV or in magazines. The first few days felt like a dream, and not just the good kind. She felt like an imposter, unsure of her place in this world. The stakes were much higher, the expectations much larger, and the pressure much more intense than anything she had experienced before. But the team welcomed her with open arms, each member acknowledging her previous success at the gala and showing a level of trust that bolstered Sarah's confidence. One afternoon, a few weeks into her new role, Sarah found herself in a meeting with Dwayne himself. She had expected him to be larger than life, and in a way, he was. But what struck her most was his kindness and his focus. There was no ego. There was only a genuine desire to make the world a better place, to use his platform for good. He had built an empire, but it was clear that his charity work meant the most to him. Sarah felt honored to be a part of it. "Sarah, I know this event's important to you," Dwayne said one day after a brainstorming session. "But it's more than just the work. This is about the people we're helping, the lives we're touching. I know you get that. Just remember, it's not about perfection, it's about making an impact." Those words stuck with Sarah. It wasn't about achieving the unattainable standard of perfection, it was about giving her all for something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, she realized that this was the fulfillment she had been seeking. It wasn't just about the accolades or the recognition, it was about being a part of something that made a difference in people's lives. The charity event came together beautifully. The venue was breathtaking, the guest list star-studded, and the atmosphere electric. Sarah worked tirelessly, but it no longer felt like work. It felt like purpose. As the night of the event approached, Sarah found herself standing backstage, taking in the enormity of the night. This was what she had always dreamed of, not just a successful event, but an event that would truly change lives. As the event kicked off, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had helped bring this moment to life, and now she was witnessing the impact of their efforts. Dwayne took the stage to speak about the charity and the lives that would be touched by the evening's donations. Sarah watched as the room filled with admiration for him, and for the work that everyone, including herself, had put into this event. The night ended with a standing ovation for Dwayne's charity. The donations had exceeded expectations, and the impact was palpable. Sarah found herself standing at the back of the room, looking out over the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a deep sense of peace. As Sarah made her way home that night, she reflected on everything she had been through, losing her job, facing the unknown, and ultimately finding herself in this incredible position. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were moments when she wanted to quit. But looking back, Sarah realized that the struggles, the failures, and the triumphs had shaped her into the person she was today. She had learned that it wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey, the people you met along the way, and the impact you had on the world. Sarah wasn't just a coordinator anymore. She was someone who had the power to change lives, to make a difference, and to inspire others to do the same. And that, she realized, was what mattered most. The weeks following the charity event were filled with excitement for Sarah. She had made her mark on Dwayne Johnson's team, and the event had been a resounding success. The media buzzed with praise, and the positive feedback kept pouring in. Sarah found herself in the spotlight more than she ever anticipated. She was even invited to a few high-profile interviews, which further solidified her place in this world that had once seemed out of reach. But just as she was beginning to settle into this new phase of her life, something unexpected happened. It started with an email. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice catching. "I'm absolutely serious," Claire confirmed with a chuckle. "You've got the job, Sarah. We'd be thrilled to have you on board." The rush of emotions that hit Sarah in that moment was overwhelming. Elation. Relief. Gratitude. But underneath it all, there was also a sense of disbelief. She had done it. She had made it. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. I won't let you down," Sarah stammered, her voice filled with genuine excitement. "I know you won't," Claire said warmly. "We'll send you the details later today. Let's get started as soon as possible." After the call ended, Sarah sat at her desk, a huge grin spreading across her face. She had been handed the opportunity of a lifetime, one that most people only dreamed of. But now that she had it, the weight of it all began to sink in. This was no longer just about her career or her pride, it was about a chance to be part of something bigger than she had ever imagined. She was about to work with Dwayne Johnson, helping to shape his charity event, contributing to something that could make a difference in the world. She was going to be a part of something that mattered. The transition to working with Dwayne's team was seamless, though it came with its own set of challenges. Sarah was thrust into high-profile meetings, coordinating with top-tier vendors, and collaborating with people whose names she had only ever seen on TV or in magazines. The first few days felt like a dream, and not just the good kind. She felt like an imposter, unsure of her place in this world. The stakes were much higher, the expectations much larger, and the pressure much more intense than anything she had experienced before. But the team welcomed her with open arms, each member acknowledging her previous success at the gala and showing a level of trust that bolstered Sarah's confidence. One afternoon, a few weeks into her new role, Sarah found herself in a meeting with Dwayne himself. She had expected him to be larger than life, and in a way, he was. But what struck her most was his kindness and his focus. There was no ego. There was only a genuine desire to make the world a better place, to use his platform for good. He had built an empire, but it was clear that his charity work meant the most to him. Sarah felt honored to be a part of it. "Sarah, I know this event's important to you," Dwayne said one day after a brainstorming session. "But it's more than just the work. This is about the people we're helping, the lives we're touching. I know you get that. Just remember, it's not about perfection, it's about making an impact." Those words stuck with Sarah. It wasn't about achieving the unattainable standard of perfection, it was about giving her all for something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, she realized that this was the fulfillment she had been seeking. It wasn't just about the accolades or the recognition, it was about being a part of something that made a difference in people's lives. The charity event came together beautifully. The venue was breathtaking, the guest list star-studded, and the atmosphere electric. Sarah worked tirelessly, but it no longer felt like work. It felt like purpose. As the night of the event approached, Sarah found herself standing backstage, taking in the enormity of the night. This was what she had always dreamed of, not just a successful event, but an event that would truly change lives. As the event kicked off, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had helped bring this moment to life, and now she was witnessing the impact of their efforts. Dwayne took the stage to speak about the charity and the lives that would be touched by the evening's donations. Sarah watched as the room filled with admiration for him, and for the work that everyone, including herself, had put into this event. The night ended with a standing ovation for Dwayne's charity. The donations had exceeded expectations, and the impact was palpable. Sarah found herself standing at the back of the room, looking out over the crowd, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a deep sense of peace. As Sarah made her way home that night, she reflected on everything she had been through, losing her job, facing the unknown, and ultimately finding herself in this incredible position. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were moments when she wanted to quit. But looking back, Sarah realized that the struggles, the failures, and the triumphs had shaped her into the person she was today. She had learned that it wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey, the people you met along the way, and the impact you had on the world. Sarah wasn't just a coordinator anymore. She was someone who had the power to change lives, to make a difference, and to inspire others to do the same. And that, she realized, was what mattered most. The weeks following the charity event were filled with excitement for Sarah. She had made her mark on Dwayne Johnson's team, and the event had been a resounding success. The media buzzed with praise, and the positive feedback kept pouring in. Sarah found herself in the spotlight more than she ever anticipated. She was even invited to a few high-profile interviews, which further solidified her place in this world that had once seemed out of reach. But just as she was beginning to settle into this new phase of her life, something unexpected happened. It started with an email. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her office, sipping her coffee and reviewing event plans for an upcoming gala, she saw an email pop up from an unknown sender. At first, she thought it might be another offer for a potential project, but as she opened the email, her stomach dropped. The subject line was blunt, urgent: "Review your contract with Dwayne Johnson's team." She quickly clicked on it, reading through the message, her heart pounding as the words began to sink in. The email was from her legal team. It detailed an issue with her contract that she had overlooked when signing the agreement with Dwayne's team. Sarah had initially been so focused on the opportunity and her excitement that she hadn't scrutinized every clause. In fact, there was a major discrepancy, a clause that severely limited her ability to take on other projects outside of Dwayne's charity events for the next year. The language was ambiguous, and the restrictions were much broader than she had realized. It was a classic, non-compete clause, one that prevented her from working with any other entertainment or celebrity clients during that period. This wasn't just a small error, it was a massive oversight that could potentially derail her entire career. Sarah was left reeling, her excitement from the event now replaced by fear and uncertainty. She called her lawyer immediately, her voice trembling as she explained the situation. "Sarah, this is a serious matter," her lawyer said after a long pause. "The contract you signed might limit your future opportunities unless we can renegotiate the terms. You need to make sure you understand exactly what you're dealing with before you proceed." For the next few days, Sarah was torn between confronting Dwayne's team with this discovery and quietly seeking legal advice to see if she could find a way out of it without creating tension. She hated the idea of challenging the very people who had given her a shot at something incredible. But the reality was, she couldn't afford to lose the freedom to grow her career and explore new opportunities. The situation felt like a cruel twist of fate, one that she hadn't seen coming. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it seemed like she might have just boxed herself in. The following week, she sat across from Claire in a sleek, modern conference room at the production office. Dwayne was out of town filming, so Claire was handling the situation in his place. The air felt thick with tension as Sarah hesitated, knowing the conversation ahead would be uncomfortable. But she had no choice. She couldn't stay silent about the issue. It was something that needed to be addressed, and quickly. "Claire," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the anxiety swirling inside her, "I've come across something in my contract that I didn't notice before. There's a non-compete clause that restricts me from working with other clients for a year. I didn't fully understand the extent of it when I signed, and now I'm worried about my future career opportunities." Claire raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Sarah had expected this reaction. After all, it was a significant issue, and one that could disrupt the flow of their professional relationship. "That's unexpected," Claire said slowly, clearly processing the implications of Sarah's words. "I can see how this could be problematic for you, but I also need to explain why the clause was included in the first place. It was put there to protect the exclusivity of the work we do. We're a small team, and we rely on our key people being fully committed to our projects." "I understand the reasoning behind it," Sarah replied, "but I didn't realize the full extent of the restrictions. I've built a career that involves working with different clients and projects, and I can't afford to lock myself into one thing. I'm still passionate about helping with the charity events, but I also want the freedom to grow." There was a long silence, and Sarah could feel the weight of the conversation settling in. Claire leaned back in her chair, clearly thinking. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke again. "Let's be clear," Claire said, her voice calm but firm. "We value what you bring to the team, Sarah. Your skills are invaluable, and we'd love to continue working with you. But we can't have you spreading yourself too thin. If you want to stay, we'll need to renegotiate the terms. But I'm not sure if Dwayne will agree to a significant change." Sarah's heart sank. It was exactly what she had feared. Her potential future with Dwayne's team was at risk, all because of a contract clause that was never fully explained to her. The possibility of losing everything she had worked for over something that was outside her control was both infuriating and heartbreaking. But as the conversation continued, Sarah found herself feeling more and more certain about one thing: this wasn't just about the contract. It was about taking control of her future. It was about standing up for her right to pursue her career the way she wanted to, even if it meant walking away from the people she had come to admire. Later that evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, staring at the city skyline. The weight of the decision ahead of her pressed heavily on her chest. Her phone buzzed with notifications of the latest praise for the charity event. It was tempting to ignore the issue and accept the situation as it was. But Sarah knew better than that. She had worked too hard to get here. She wasn't going to let one clause in a contract define her future. In the end, Sarah made a decision that was both difficult and necessary. She would approach Dwayne and his team with one final offer: either they would adjust the terms to allow her the freedom she needed to work with other clients, or she would walk away from the job that had once felt like a dream come true. It was a risky move, but it was the only one that felt true to who she was becoming. Sarah wasn't just a woman who took opportunities handed to her, she was someone who created her own. The next few days were filled with constant back and forth in Sarah's mind. She knew the decision she was about to make would shape the rest of her career, possibly even her life. The pressure weighed heavily on her. On one hand, she had everything she'd ever dreamed of, working with one of the biggest names in entertainment, creating events that could change lives. On the other hand, she couldn't let go of the freedom she had spent years cultivating, building a career that wasn't tied down by anyone or anything. What would Dwayne think? What would Claire think? She couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were far higher than a simple negotiation. There was a chance she might lose it all. But deep down, Sarah knew she had to stand up for herself, for her future, and for her career ambitions. If she gave in now, she risked losing her identity as a professional, a person who didn't bend to others' expectations, but instead forged her own path. The weekend before her scheduled meeting with Dwayne's team, Sarah found herself sitting at her kitchen table, reviewing her options. Her legal team had offered their support, suggesting that she insist on revising the contract or face the potential fallout. But the truth was, Sarah wasn't sure she could live with just being another member of the team, a cog in the machine. She had come this far on her own merit. She couldn't compromise her independence now. That Sunday afternoon, as Sarah stared out her apartment window at the bright city lights below, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. It wasn't the peace of knowing what the outcome would be, it was the peace of knowing she was ready to face whatever happened next. She would go into that meeting, hold her ground, and be true to herself, no matter the consequences. The morning of the meeting arrived, and Sarah dressed with purpose. She chose her favorite professional outfit, a sleek black blazer with a crisp white blouse, paired with black trousers. It wasn't just about looking the part, it was about feeling confident in what she was about to do. This meeting would set the course for everything, and she needed to be in the right mindset. When Sarah walked into the office that morning, Claire was already seated at the conference table, a quiet seriousness in her expression. As Sarah sat down, she could feel the tension in the air, a subtle undercurrent that both of them knew was there. Claire, ever the professional, was the first to speak. "Sarah, I'm glad you're here. I think we should dive right into it." There was no turning back now. Sarah took a deep breath and began. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, Claire. And while I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work with you all, I can't ignore the restrictions in my contract any longer. I need the freedom to explore other projects, to keep growing and developing my career in a way that's true to my values." Claire's face remained unreadable as she listened, but Sarah could tell she was processing the words carefully. The silence stretched between them before Claire finally spoke. "I understand where you're coming from," Claire said, her voice measured. "But you have to understand, this team is built on trust and exclusivity. Dwayne's brand is built on loyalty, on commitment. We can't have people splitting their time and energy between us and other high-profile clients, it disrupts the integrity of what we're trying to build." "I understand the importance of loyalty," Sarah replied, trying to maintain her composure. "But loyalty isn't just about exclusivity. It's about trust. And I trust that you'll understand my need for balance. I'm not asking for total freedom, I'm asking for the chance to work with other clients in the industry without jeopardizing my position here. I can still give my all to the charity events. But I need the flexibility to continue growing professionally in ways that go beyond this." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to look away from Claire. She had spoken her truth, and now, all she could do was wait. For a moment, Claire said nothing. Her gaze shifted as she processed the situation. Sarah could tell she wasn't just considering the logistics, but the long-term implications of what Sarah was asking. Finally, Claire spoke again, her voice quieter but firm. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah. You've proven yourself more than capable, and we've all been impressed with your work. But I'll be honest, it's a difficult ask. Dwayne's been very clear about how he values loyalty and consistency in his team. This is not going to be an easy conversation to have with him." Sarah nodded, knowing this wouldn't be easy for anyone involved. But she couldn't back down now. "Then let's have that conversation," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to talk to him, Claire. I need to be transparent. If this is a deal-breaker, I'll understand. But I can't keep putting my future on hold." The following morning, Sarah received a call from Claire, asking her to meet with Dwayne. She knew that this was the turning point. Either Dwayne would understand, or he wouldn't. Either he would be willing to adjust, or he would stand by the contract's terms, and Sarah would have to walk away. When Sarah arrived at the venue where they were meeting, she was led into a private lounge where Dwayne was waiting. As always, he exuded calm energy, but today, there was a seriousness in his posture that made Sarah's stomach tighten. "Sarah, thank you for coming. I've heard a lot about this discussion, and I think it's time we talk it out," Dwayne said as he gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for taking the time, Dwayne," Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with the weight of the situation. "I've been a part of this team now for a few months, and I believe in what we're doing here. But there's a part of me that needs to grow beyond this. I can't ignore the need to continue exploring my career, to work with other clients and grow as a professional. The restrictions in my contract are preventing me from doing that." Dwayne listened carefully, his gaze steady as she spoke. When she finished, he took a moment to gather his thoughts. "I respect you, Sarah. And I understand that you're passionate about your career. You've been a huge asset to our team, and I want to make sure you're happy with your position here. But I also have to balance that with what we stand for. We are a family here, and that means loyalty and commitment. I've always been a big believer in people going after their dreams, but there has to be a balance." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. It was a pivotal moment. She had no idea where this conversation would go, but she knew one thing for sure: she had spoken her truth, and she was ready for whatever came next. The conversation with Dwayne was unlike anything Sarah had anticipated. He was calm, measured, and yet there was an undercurrent of tension in his words. He wasn't angry, he was conflicted. The truth was, Dwayne had always been a mentor to those around him, a figure who valued loyalty, but he also understood the pursuit of personal goals. It wasn't the typical corporate boss dynamic, it felt more like a friendship in conflict with business reality. But as Sarah sat there, listening to his words, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. It was clear that the foundation of this relationship, whether professional or personal, was now being tested. The decision he would make would have the power to shift the trajectory of her career, and maybe even the trajectory of her life. "I get where you're coming from," Dwayne finally said, leaning forward slightly. "And I respect your ambition. I didn't get here by standing still. I had to break barriers too. But here's the thing, Sarah, everything I've built has been with a team that's 100% in. There's no room for half measures, no room for distractions. It's the same with my charity work. People's lives are on the line when we get involved. I can't have my team scattered, pulling in different directions." Sarah could feel her heart racing, and the realization hit her hard: the stakes were much higher than just a job or a project. This was about the very nature of her career. Could she really afford to sacrifice the independence that had allowed her to thrive in the past? Was she ready to let go of the future she had built for herself outside of this world? "I know you're passionate about what we do," Sarah said, her voice softer now, as she struggled to maintain her composure. "And I've always respected you, Dwayne. But my career has always been mine to shape. I don't want to lose myself in someone else's dream. I want to continue building my own, even if that means stepping away from this. There was a long pause, a moment of tension hanging in the air between them. Dwayne sat back, running a hand through his hair. His eyes were thoughtful, and Sarah could tell he was weighing the situation carefully. "Look, I'm not saying I don't understand what you're going through. I've been there," Dwayne said finally, his tone a bit softer. "But here's the thing, life doesn't always work in neat little boxes. Sometimes, you have to make sacrifices for something bigger. If you can't commit to this team, I'm not sure what's next. But I won't hold it against you." Sarah swallowed hard. That was the moment, her breaking point. She had always believed in her ability to chart her own course, to build a life that wasn't constrained by others' expectations. But now, standing in front of Dwayne, the reality of the situation was undeniable. She could walk away from the team, but she would be leaving behind something much bigger than herself. And yet, Sarah knew deep down that her decision had to be made. She couldn't let fear of change dictate her path. It was time to face the consequences, whatever they may be. The conversation ended with no concrete resolution, but the feeling in Sarah's chest was a mixture of anxiety and determination. She left the meeting knowing that things would never be the same again. Whether Dwayne would come around and accept her terms, or whether she would walk away from everything she'd worked for, remained uncertain. But as she walked out of the office, the city around her seemed to reflect her internal turmoil. It was the same city, the same skyline she had looked out upon for years, but now, everything felt different. In the days that followed, Sarah tried to focus on the events she still had to plan, the projects that were in motion. But her mind kept returning to the meeting with Dwayne, replaying every word, every gesture. Would he come back with a counteroffer? Would he even want her to stay if she wasn't fully committed to his vision? It wasn't until the following Thursday, when Sarah received a call from Claire, that she got her answer. "Sarah, Dwayne wants to meet again. He's thought it through, and he's got an idea he wants to propose. He's willing to make some adjustments." The relief that flooded Sarah's body was almost immediate, but it was tinged with apprehension. What did this mean? Was it really a solution, or just a temporary fix? When Sarah walked into the conference room for the second time, she saw both Dwayne and Claire sitting at the table. This time, Dwayne looked more relaxed, even confident. He stood as she entered, giving her a small but genuine smile. "Sarah, I'm glad you're here," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. Claire nodded toward the chair, and Sarah sat, trying to steady the flurry of emotions rising within her. "I've given it a lot of thought," Dwayne began, his tone serious but without the weight of earlier tension. "And I want you to stay. But we need to find a balance. The reality is, what we're doing here is important. But I also know you're not the kind of person who can be boxed in. So, here's my proposal: we'll loosen the restrictions on your contract. You'll still have a key role in the charity work we do, but I'm willing to allow you to take on other projects, so long as they don't interfere with our major events. You'll be part of the team, but you'll also have the flexibility to continue growing your own career." Sarah blinked in surprise. This was more than she had ever hoped for, a compromise that allowed her to pursue her ambitions without losing everything she had worked for. "I appreciate this, Dwayne," Sarah said, her voice steady with emotion. "This isn't just about the work, it's about my future. And I can't thank you enough for understanding that." Dwayne smiled. "Sarah, you've earned this. I've seen what you can do, and I don't want to stand in the way of your success. Let's move forward, together." The days following her meeting with Dwayne were a blur of mixed emotions. On one hand, Sarah felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had fought for what she believed in, and she had emerged victorious. On the other hand, she was keenly aware that the dynamic with Dwayne and the team would never quite be the same. Things had shifted, and while the agreement was a compromise, it still required a delicate balance. She had earned her place, and now she had to prove that she could be just as committed to the team's goals while forging her own path forward. She couldn't afford to lose sight of what mattered most to her, her independence. But she also couldn't let go of the incredible opportunity to be part of something much larger than herself. As she returned to her office that afternoon, Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message from Claire. It was brief, but clear. Dwayne is happy with the agreement. Let's get back to work. That simple message sent a wave of relief through Sarah. For the first time in what felt like weeks, she could breathe again. The pressure had lifted, but the weight of responsibility remained. Over the next few weeks, Sarah adjusted to her new reality. The flexible arrangement Dwayne had proposed worked in her favor. She continued her charity work with the same passion and energy she always had, but now she also began to take on side projects that allowed her to explore new aspects of her career. Slowly, she started to reconnect with the people she had met during her earlier years in the industry, people she had been unable to work with because of the restrictive clauses in her old contract. One of those projects was a collaboration with a major sports brand that had approached her about organizing an event for an up-and-coming athlete. The event would showcase the athlete's story and encourage fans to follow their journey. It was everything Sarah had been missing, a chance to combine her passion for event planning with her love for storytelling. It was a moment of clarity for Sarah, a reminder of why she had started in this business in the first place. She wasn't just making events happen, she was telling stories, creating connections, and leaving a lasting impact. As she sat down to brainstorm ideas for the event, Sarah received a call from Claire, her voice upbeat on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I've got good news. Dwayne wants you to lead an event next month. It's a big one, and he's counting on you to make it happen." The words sent a jolt of excitement through Sarah. This was it. This was the kind of responsibility she had always wanted, the opportunity to show that she could manage not only her own projects but also something truly monumental for Dwayne's team. But as quickly as the excitement surged, doubt crept in. What if the pressure was too much? What if she couldn't balance everything, her side projects, her relationship with Dwayne's team, and her desire for personal growth? That evening, after a long day of planning, Sarah sat on her couch and thought about the journey she had been through to get to this point. She had fought for her independence and had come out on top. But now, it felt like a new kind of challenge. A challenge that required balance. A challenge that demanded she juggle both her dreams and her commitments to others. It was no longer just about her career, it was about the people she had brought along with her and how she could continue to grow while maintaining those relationships. The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind. Sarah poured herself into every detail. She wanted to make sure everything went smoothly, from the guest list to the venue's design. She knew Dwayne's reputation was on the line, but she also knew that her ability to manage the event was a direct reflection of the agreement she had worked so hard to secure. On the day of the event, Sarah stood backstage, her heart pounding with anticipation. The venue was packed, the energy electric. Dwayne was on stage, working his magic with the crowd, as Sarah oversaw the last-minute details. She could feel the weight of the moment. The success of this event meant that she had truly found her place in both worlds. It was her opportunity to prove that she could have it all, a successful career, personal freedom, and the chance to be part of something larger. As the night unfolded, everything came together perfectly. The athletes shared their inspiring stories, the crowd was engaged, and the event was a huge success. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt the thrill of accomplishment. She had done it. She had navigated the tricky balance between loyalty to Dwayne's team and her own professional growth. And as the event came to a close, Sarah found herself in the wings, watching the crowd applaud. She couldn't help but smile. This was the future she had fought for. This was the new beginning she had been searching for. The next day, Dwayne called Sarah into his office. Her stomach fluttered with nervous excitement, unsure of what he would say. "Sarah," Dwayne said, his voice warm but firm. "You did an outstanding job last night. I couldn't be more proud of the way you handled the event. This is exactly why I wanted you on the team." Sarah beamed with pride. She had earned his respect, and now, she had earned her place in this world. But, Dwayne continued, his expression shifting slightly, I want to talk to you about something else. You've proven that you can manage big events, and you've done so while maintaining your own identity. But I also want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Don't lose sight of what matters to you outside of all of this. I know it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind, but remember to pause every now and then. Sarah felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. Dwayne wasn't just concerned with the business side of things, he cared about her well-being, about her growth both professionally and personally. Thank you, Dwayne, Sarah said, her voice sincere. That means more to me than you know. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following months were a testament to Sarah's adaptability. She had managed to juggle her personal ambitions with the demands of the team, and despite the initial doubts she had faced, things seemed to be falling into place. Her collaboration with Dwayne and his team had only deepened her connection to the charity work and larger events that they organized. But just as things seemed to settle, Sarah received an unexpected challenge, one that would push her to her limits. It all started one afternoon when she received a call from Claire. Sarah had been sitting at her desk, catching up on emails, when the phone rang. Sarah, Claire said, her voice tight, we need to talk. Dwayne wants you to help us with something, and it's big. Sarah leaned forward, sensing the urgency in Claire's tone. What's going on? Claire hesitated for a moment, as if she were carefully choosing her words. It's a charity event, but this one is different. It's going to be the largest fundraiser we've ever hosted. The stakes are higher than anything we've done before, and Dwayne's put you in charge of managing the entire event. The weight of her words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Wait, what? Are you serious? I'm not sure I'm ready for something like this. It's huge. I know it's a lot, Claire replied quickly, but Dwayne believes you can handle it. He's confident in you. But you'll need to work closely with the team to pull it off. We need you to be at your best. The pressure in Claire's voice was evident, and Sarah could feel it too. This wasn't just another event. This was a make-or-break moment for her, and for the entire team. The event was expected to raise millions of dollars, and it would draw national attention. It was an opportunity to showcase her skills at a level she had never imagined. The thought of being responsible for such an enormous project both thrilled and terrified her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah finally spoke. Okay, let's do it. I'll need some time to review the details and put together a plan. Great, Claire said with a sigh of relief. We'll talk soon, Sarah. As Sarah hung up the phone, her mind began to race. This was the kind of challenge that could make or break her career. She had always been good at planning events, but this was different. The pressure was on. There was no room for error. And she knew that the success or failure of this event would leave a mark on her reputation, for better or worse. The following weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late nights. Sarah poured herself into the event, working closely with Dwayne's team to ensure everything was on track. She had a clear vision in her mind of how the event should look, but the reality of pulling it all together was far more complex than she had anticipated. The venue had to be perfect, the guest list had to be curated with care, and every detail, down to the smallest aspect, needed to be flawless. But as the weeks went on, Sarah began to feel the strain. The pressure to succeed was overwhelming, and it seemed like there was never enough time to get everything done. Late nights at the office stretched into early mornings, and there were days when she barely had time to eat or sleep. The once healthy balance between her personal projects and the team's work had started to tilt dangerously toward the latter. It wasn't long before cracks began to appear in her carefully constructed routine. Sarah was increasingly irritable, snapping at her colleagues during meetings, and her exhaustion started to show. She was no longer the vibrant, enthusiastic Sarah that everyone had come to know. She was tired, drained, and constantly worried that she might miss something important. The stress was starting to take its toll. One particularly difficult evening, as Sarah reviewed the final guest list for the fundraiser, she received an unexpected call from her sister, Rachel. "Sarah, I haven't heard from you in days. Are you okay? You don't sound like yourself." Rachel's voice was filled with concern, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had been so consumed by the event that she had barely had time to check in with her family, much less herself. "I'm fine, Rach. Just busy. The event is coming up, and I'm handling a lot right now," Sarah replied, her voice strained despite her best efforts to sound normal. "Sarah, I know you. You're always doing too much. You need to take a break. We're family, and I'm worried about you," Rachel insisted. "I'll be fine. Just one more push, and then I can rest," Sarah replied, brushing off her sister's concerns. But deep down, she knew Rachel was right. She was pushing herself too hard, and it was starting to show. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her office, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. The weight of everything she had been juggling, the event, her side projects, her personal life, had finally reached a tipping point. She had always prided herself on being able to manage it all, but now she realized that something had to give. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of the fundraiser and the consequences of failing. But even more than that, she realized how much she had neglected the people who mattered most, her family, her friends, and even herself. The things she had fought so hard for, the balance, the independence, had slipped away in the face of overwhelming pressure. The next morning, as Sarah walked into the office, she knew she couldn't continue down this path. She needed to find a way to regain control, to remember why she had chosen this path in the first place. She couldn't let the pressure of the event, and the people who depended on her, become a source of stress that would ruin her. When she arrived at Dwayne's office for a meeting, she decided it was time to be honest. She couldn't do it all alone. "Dwayne," she began, her voice firm but vulnerable, "I need your help. I can't keep up with everything. The event is huge, and it's taking everything out of me. I don't want to let the team down, but I'm struggling." Dwayne's face softened as he listened to Sarah. He had always been someone who valued the well-being of his team, and it was clear to him that Sarah needed a break. "I get it, Sarah. I really do. You've been working non-stop, and I can see the toll it's taking on you. We'll figure this out. You're not alone in this. We've got your back." In that moment, Sarah realized that she had been trying to carry the weight of the world on her own. But it didn't have to be that way. Dwayne and the team were there to support her. "Thank you," she said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I don't know what I'd do without you guys." Dwayne smiled. "We're a team, Sarah. You're not in this alone." As Sarah continued to find her rhythm in the new environment, the weeks following the big charity event were filled with a sense of relief and accomplishment. The fundraiser had been a success beyond anyone's expectations, and while it was one of the most challenging projects of her career, it also proved her ability to handle immense pressure. The support of the team, especially Dwayne, had been instrumental in her ability to get through it all. It was a reminder that no one could, or should, do it alone. However, even as the dust settled, something lingered beneath the surface. Sarah had learned the hard way how to balance her career and personal life, but there were still cracks in the foundation that needed mending. Her own insecurities, the fears of failure, and the lingering tension of her newfound position weighed heavily on her. One evening, as Sarah sat on the balcony of her apartment overlooking the city, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from Claire. "Dwayne wants to meet with you tomorrow. He wants to discuss something important." The message was brief, but it sent a wave of uncertainty through Sarah. Why would Dwayne want to meet? They had just wrapped up the event, and everything was going smoothly, at least, that's what Sarah thought. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this a follow-up to the event, or something more? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office early, her nerves already getting the best of her. The elevator ride felt unusually long, and by the time she stepped into Dwayne's office, her stomach was in knots. Dwayne was sitting behind his desk, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look that suggested he had something important to say. He motioned for Sarah to sit. "Sarah, I wanted to take a moment to talk about your future here," he began. "You've done an incredible job, especially with the charity event. Everyone's impressed with your work. But there's something I want to bring to your attention." Sarah's heart raced. She couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment when her fears would come to fruition. Maybe Dwayne didn't think she was cut out for this after all. "I've been thinking about your position on the team," Dwayne continued, leaning forward. "You're incredibly talented, but you're also pulling in a lot of different directions. I've noticed you've been taking on more than anyone should. I need you to know something. You're doing great, but I don't want you burning yourself out." Sarah was taken aback. This wasn't what she had expected. Dwayne wasn't criticizing her performance, he was concerned for her well-being. "I've noticed that you've been working late nights and running on fumes," he added. "I don't want you to get lost in this whirlwind of events and forget why you started. Your creativity, your energy, it's what makes you so valuable to this team. But if you burn out, we all lose." It was the first time someone had truly acknowledged her struggle, and for a moment, Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had been so focused on doing everything perfectly that she hadn't realized how much she was sacrificing her own peace of mind. "I appreciate that, Dwayne," Sarah said, her voice steady but vulnerable. "I've been trying to balance everything, but it's been harder than I expected. I guess I've been so afraid of letting everyone down that I pushed myself too hard." Dwayne smiled, a reassuring glint in his eyes. "We've all been there. But you don't have to do it alone. This is a team. And part of being a leader is knowing when to lean on others. You've proven yourself time and time again, but now it's time to make sure you're looking out for yourself, too." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Dwayne wasn't just offering her career advice, he was offering her a lifeline. He was giving her permission to slow down, to ask for help, and to take care of herself. Over the next few weeks, Sarah made a conscious effort to shift her approach to work. She began to delegate more tasks to her team members, trusting them to handle the details while she focused on the bigger picture. She also made time for herself, something she hadn't done in months. Whether it was a quiet evening at home, a trip to the gym, or simply catching up with her family, Sarah learned the importance of recharging. And as she grew more comfortable with this new balance, something unexpected happened: her work improved. She felt more inspired, more creative, and more focused than she had in weeks. The pressure of constantly needing to prove herself lifted, and in its place, Sarah began to find joy in her work again. But not everything was as smooth as it seemed. As Sarah settled into this new rhythm, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there were still unresolved tensions within the team. It wasn't anything obvious, but the atmosphere had changed slightly. Dwayne's team was large, and there were always egos and conflicting personalities. As Sarah became more involved in the inner workings of the company, she began to notice subtle undercurrents of rivalry and competition. At the same time, Sarah couldn't ignore the whispers that followed her everywhere. Some of the staff members seemed to view her success with a hint of resentment. It wasn't overt, but it was there, a silent judgment that lingered in the hallways and boardrooms. They resented the fact that Sarah, someone who had been brought in relatively recently, had already achieved so much. Sarah had never been one to shy away from confrontation, but this felt different. She knew she couldn't win everyone over, and she wasn't interested in trying. However, the discomfort of being an outsider on a team that prided itself on camaraderie was hard to ignore. One afternoon, as Sarah was leaving the office, Claire caught up with her in the parking lot. "Hey, you all right?" Claire asked, her expression concerned. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little worn out. But it's all part of the job, right? Claire looked at her thoughtfully. I know things have been tough. But don't let the small stuff get to you. You've earned your place, Sarah. And if anyone's got a problem with that, they can take it up with me. Sarah smiled at Claire's support, but deep down, she knew the challenges weren't over. She couldn't avoid the tension forever, but she could control how she responded to it. And for now, that would have to be enough. The weeks following Sarah's meeting with Dwayne were filled with mixed emotions. On the one hand, she felt more at ease with herself and her work. Her newfound approach, trusting her team, taking time for herself and stepping back from the relentless drive to prove herself, had made a significant difference in her well-being. On the other hand, the quiet tension that had begun to simmer within the team couldn't be ignored. Sarah was starting to understand that her position, while enviable to some, also made her a target for those who felt threatened or overlooked. It wasn't just the whispers in the hallways or the passive-aggressive comments during meetings. There were moments when Sarah could feel it, the subtle exclusion, the glances that lingered too long, the veiled comments from certain members of the team. Some of them resented her quick rise, and others resented the fact that she had earned Dwayne's trust. What they didn't know, though, was that Sarah wasn't just taking on more responsibilities for herself. She was doing it for a cause she believed in, and for people who needed her. But one morning, everything changed. Sarah arrived at the office to an atmosphere that felt off, thick, tense, and filled with an unspoken urgency. As she walked through the halls, she noticed people whispering in hushed voices, darting glances in her direction. The unease was palpable. Sarah, Claire called out from her office, her voice strained. We need to talk. Sarah's stomach tightened as she stepped inside. Claire was sitting at her desk, her face pale, eyes wide with concern. She gestured for Sarah to sit, her movements quick and sharp. What's going on? Sarah asked, her voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. I don't know how to tell you this, Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. But I just found out that there's a leak, someone's been sharing confidential information with the press. It's about the event, about you. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the blood draining from her face. What do you mean, a leak? What kind of information? Claire swallowed hard. It's not just about the event. It's personal. Someone has been feeding the tabloids information about your involvement with Dwayne. About your background, your history, and there are rumors that you got the job because of him. That you were given special treatment because you two are close. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, but she couldn't quite process the gravity of what Claire was saying. She had worked so hard to get to where she was, her achievements had been earned, not given. The thought that someone would spread lies about her, especially in such a personal and damaging way, was a slap in the face. Who would do this? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't know yet. But we need to find out quickly, Claire said urgently. The press has caught wind of it, and it's starting to spread. We need to shut this down before it spirals out of control. Sarah felt a knot of anger tighten in her chest. She had worked tirelessly to build a career based on merit, and now someone was trying to destroy everything she had worked for with lies and rumors. I can't believe this is happening, Sarah said, her voice shaking with frustration. I've never asked for special treatment. I've earned everything on my own. And now they're trying to twist it all into something else. I know, Claire said, her expression sympathetic. We'll get to the bottom of this. But I need you to stay calm. This isn't just about you, this affects Dwayne too. We have to make sure this doesn't tarnish his reputation. Dwayne's name hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had never wanted to be a distraction or a liability to him, and now she was caught in the middle of a scandal that threatened everything he had built. He had been nothing but supportive of her, and now someone was trying to use their connection as a weapon. "I'll do whatever it takes," Sarah said, determination flooding her veins. "We need to figure out who's behind this and put a stop to it. I won't let them tear down everything I've worked for." The next few days were a whirlwind of frantic calls, meetings with legal teams, and long hours spent in the office. Sarah and Claire worked tirelessly to investigate the source of the leak, but every lead they followed seemed to hit a dead end. Meanwhile, the rumors continued to spread like wildfire, and the media coverage grew more invasive. Sarah was bombarded with questions from reporters who seemed determined to uncover some scandalous truth. They hounded her at work, at home, even at the gym. The constant pressure was suffocating, and Sarah found herself questioning everything. Who could have done this? Who would want to hurt her like this? Dwayne was visibly upset by the situation, but he was also determined to support Sarah through it. He made sure to keep in close contact with her, reassuring her that they would get through this together. "We'll figure this out," he said one evening, when they were alone in his office. "The truth is on our side. People will see that." But even as Dwayne spoke with confidence, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the truth might not be enough. The damage was already done. The rumors had already planted seeds of doubt in people's minds, and it would take more than a simple statement to erase them. The situation came to a head when Sarah received an anonymous tip. The person on the other end of the phone claimed to know exactly who had leaked the information. They were offering proof, screenshots of text messages, emails, and even recordings that implicated one of the senior members of the team. The revelation shook Sarah to her core. It was someone she had trusted, someone she had worked alongside for months. The person behind the leak was someone who had always appeared supportive, even friendly. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined. As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. This wasn't just about the rumors anymore. This was a personal betrayal from someone she had called a colleague, and maybe even a friend. "I can't believe it," she muttered to herself, gripping the edge of the desk as she tried to steady her shaking hands. The days that followed the anonymous tip were a blur for Sarah. She couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her gut. Someone on the inside had betrayed her, and while the identity of the culprit was now clear, confronting them wasn't going to be easy. She spent sleepless nights running through scenarios in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Would this person deny everything? Would they fight back? Would they try to make her look like the villain? Sarah had always prided herself on being able to read people, but this situation was different. The person behind the leak wasn't just a colleague, they were someone she had worked closely with. A sense of betrayal lingered over everything, and Sarah found it hard to believe that someone so close to her could turn on her like this. The tip had come through loud and clear. Someone had been leaking information about Sarah's personal and professional life, including the rumors about her connection to Dwayne. The culprit, according to the evidence, was none other than Robert Matthews, a senior member of the team who had been with the company for years. Robert had always been charming, reliable, and supportive, qualities that had made him one of Sarah's closest allies when she first started working there. They had collaborated on numerous projects, and Sarah had come to rely on his experience and insight. But now, as Sarah sat in her office, staring at the damning evidence in front of her, the trust she had placed in Robert felt shattered. How could he have done this? Was it jealousy? Was it a power play to undermine her role in the company? She didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The confrontation was set for the following afternoon. Sarah had informed Claire and Dwayne about the situation, and they both agreed that it was important to handle the matter delicately, especially since Robert had been with the company for so long. However, Sarah wasn't about to let Robert get away with undermining her reputation. She had worked too hard for this position to let it slip away because of a lie. At precisely 2 p.m., Sarah stood outside Robert's office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed what she was going to say, but now that the moment had arrived, everything felt surreal. She wasn't sure what kind of person she was about to face, Would Robert be defensive, apologetic, or worse, completely indifferent? Taking a deep breath, Sarah knocked on Robert's office door. His voice called out from inside, inviting her to enter. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Robert was sitting behind his desk, looking up at her with a warm smile. "Sarah, what's up?" he asked, his voice casual. "I need to talk to you," she said, her tone steady but firm. She wasn't sure if she was more angry or hurt, but she had to keep her composure. "It's about the leaks. The information that's been getting out about me, about my past, my relationship with Dwayne, it's been coming from you." Robert's smile faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "What do you mean, coming from me? I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah held up her phone, showing him the screenshots of the messages that had been traced back to him. The evidence was undeniable. There were exchanges that confirmed Robert had been passing along confidential details about her, as well as some fabricated rumors to the press. Robert's face turned pale as he saw the evidence in front of him. For a moment, he didn't speak, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for a way out. "Robert," Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with disappointment. "You don't have to do this. I want to understand why you did this. What's going on?" Robert ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the weight of the situation. He looked down at the desk for a long moment before finally meeting her gaze. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I was frustrated. I've been passed over for promotions for years, and when you came in, everything seemed to change overnight. You were given everything, and I felt like I was just forgotten. The pressure, the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough, it wore me down. And when I saw you and Dwayne working so closely together, I thought it might be my chance to finally get noticed. I thought maybe if I exposed some dirt, I could bring you down and get what I deserved." Sarah's heart sank. The words he spoke were laced with bitterness and resentment, but they also revealed a vulnerability that Sarah hadn't expected. She had never realized how much Robert had been struggling behind the scenes. She had always seen him as a reliable ally, someone who was above the petty games that sometimes ran rampant in the office. But now, she saw the cracks in the facade. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah," Robert continued, his voice now quieter. "I just felt like I didn't have any other choice. It was stupid. And I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know the truth." Sarah stood there, her mind racing. She didn't know whether to be angry or empathetic. She could feel the weight of Robert's confession, but at the same time, the betrayal was too deep to ignore. The damage had been done, and trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. "I don't know what to say, Robert," Sarah finally replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "I understand why you felt the way you did, but this isn't the way to handle it. We're supposed to be a team, and now you've jeopardized everything we've worked for. Dwayne, the team, me. You've made this personal." Robert's face crumpled, and for the first time in the conversation, he looked truly remorseful. "I know. I didn't think it through. I was blinded by my own jealousy, my own insecurities. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't expect you to trust me again, but I'll take responsibility for what I've done." Sarah took a deep breath, her emotions conflicting. She had spent so much time building trust with everyone in the company, and now, one person's selfish actions had undone it all. But as she looked at Robert, she realized that forgiveness might be the only way to move forward, not for his sake, but for hers. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Robert," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But I will make sure this doesn't define me. I've worked too hard to let this be the end of my story." Robert nodded solemnly. "I understand. And I'll accept whatever consequences come my way. I'll do what I can to make this right." The fallout from Sarah's confrontation with Robert was far from over. Although she had confronted him in person, the impact of his betrayal lingered like a shadow over the entire team. The moment they had learned of Robert's actions, things had begun to change. No longer was Sarah simply managing her own career trajectory, now, she had to focus on rebuilding the trust that had been broken. Not only with Robert, but with her colleagues, her boss, and most importantly, with herself. Sarah's role had always been to lead by example, and now more than ever, she knew she had to prove that she could not only rise above the lies but also restore the sense of unity that had once made her team strong. However, the task ahead was daunting. The next few days in the office felt like walking through a minefield. Every interaction felt strained, every glance too long. People were talking, Sarah could feel it. Some were probably sympathizing with her, while others were likely questioning her abilities and her integrity. She wasn't sure who to trust anymore, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched made every move she made feel scrutinized. It was a weight she wasn't used to carrying, and it made her question whether she had the strength to move forward. But she couldn't dwell on that. Sarah had learned the hard way that letting herself get bogged down by the drama and distractions only made her lose sight of her goals. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for her team and the people who believed in her. Dwayne, of course, had been a steady source of support. Despite the chaos, he remained an unwavering ally, providing Sarah with the encouragement she needed to keep pushing forward. Their conversations, which had once been filled with excitement about new opportunities and dreams, now focused on damage control. Dwayne knew that, together, they could face anything. One afternoon, as Sarah was wrapping up a meeting with a few members of the team, Dwayne called her into his office. He looked serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made Sarah feel like everything would be okay. "Sarah, I know things have been tough lately," Dwayne started, his tone gentle but firm. "But I want you to know that I've got your back. You've handled everything with so much class, and I have no doubt that you'll come out of this stronger. But there's something else we need to talk about." Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" Dwayne sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We need to address the team. I know you've been trying to keep everything together, but we can't keep ignoring the elephant in the room. The trust has been shaken, and the only way to rebuild it is to have a direct conversation with everyone." Sarah felt a rush of unease at the thought of addressing the entire team. She had always been good at managing one-on-one conversations, but this was different. This wasn't about dealing with Robert anymore. This was about repairing the collective bond that had been damaged by his actions. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that," Sarah confessed. "It's been hard enough just dealing with Robert's betrayal. I'm not sure I can stand in front of everyone and make them believe in me again." "I get it," Dwayne said, his voice softening. "But sometimes, the hardest thing to do is exactly what will make the biggest difference. They need to hear it from you, what happened, how you're feeling, and what you're doing to make it right. If you want them to trust you, you have to trust them." His words stuck with Sarah as she left Dwayne's office. It was true. If she couldn't be transparent, if she couldn't show vulnerability in front of her team, then how could she expect them to do the same? Rebuilding trust wasn't just about actions, it was about being open, honest, and willing to take responsibility. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could control how she handled it moving forward. The next day, Sarah called for a team-wide meeting. When the moment arrived, she stood in front of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Everyone's eyes were on her, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and concern. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew it was necessary. "Thank you all for being here," Sarah began, her voice steady but carrying an underlying weight of emotion. "I want to address something that has been hanging over all of us for the past few weeks. I know that the events surrounding Robert's actions have caused a lot of tension and uncertainty. And I want to be clear, everything that has happened, the leaks, the rumors, it was never intended. I didn't ask for this, but I also understand that I need to take responsibility for my role in it." She paused, looking around the room. Some faces were soft with understanding, while others were still clouded with doubt. But Sarah pressed on, her voice gaining strength. I also want you to know that, despite the lies that have been spread, I have always acted with the best interests of the team in mind. I've never used my relationship with Dwayne or anyone else to get ahead. I've worked hard to earn my place here. And while I can't change what has happened, I promise you all that I'm going to do everything I can to rebuild your trust. There was a moment of silence, and Sarah felt the weight of it pressing down on her. Would they forgive her? Would they be able to see past the rumors and support her again? Finally, Claire, one of Sarah's most trusted colleagues, stood up. I don't think any of us have doubted your work ethic, Sarah. What happened wasn't your fault. It's a terrible situation, and I know it's hard, but you're not alone in this. We all need to come together to move forward. One by one, other members of the team spoke up, offering their support, their understanding. The conversation was difficult, but it also felt like a weight lifting from Sarah's shoulders. They were listening. They were willing to give her a chance. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere in the office began to shift. The tension that had once been thick in the air started to dissipate. People were more willing to collaborate, more open in their communications. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of awkwardness, but Sarah could feel the team slowly healing. Dwayne continued to be a constant source of strength for Sarah. He had been with her through it all, and his faith in her never wavered. But now, with the team beginning to heal, Sarah knew that her focus had to be on her work and her personal growth. This experience had changed her, it had tested her in ways she had never anticipated, but it had also shown her just how resilient she could be. With Robert's departure from the company and the truth now out in the open, the road ahead seemed clearer. Sarah wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving, rebuilding herself and her team. And as for Dwayne, he was still by her side, reminding her daily that no matter the challenges, they would face them together. The months following the team's heart-to-heart were filled with hard work, growth, and a sense of camaraderie that Sarah hadn't felt in a long time. With Robert's departure, the atmosphere in the office gradually became more open, and trust began to rebuild. It wasn't instantaneous, but each day felt like a step towards something new, something better. Sarah found herself more in control of her role than ever before. She had learned the importance of transparency and honesty, even when it meant facing uncomfortable truths. She'd also learned how much she truly valued the relationships she had built with her team. Their support, especially after everything that had happened, meant more to her than she had realized. One afternoon, Sarah stood at the window of her office, watching as the city skyline stretched before her. She thought back to the days when her career had seemed like a series of endless challenges, and she had never imagined that something like this would happen. But now, after everything that had come to pass, Sarah felt stronger, more resilient. She had faced betrayal, adversity, and doubts, but none of it had broken her. Instead, it had made her more determined. She had proven to herself that she could stand strong in the face of hardship. But even more importantly, she had shown others that it was possible to rise above the obstacles that life threw at them. She was not just a survivor, she was a leader. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Dwayne. Got some big news. Meet me at 5. Curious, Sarah quickly texted back, agreeing to meet him. She had a feeling that whatever he had to tell her would be important, and she was eager to hear it. Ever since the scandal with Robert, Dwayne had been there for her in ways that went beyond friendship. Their bond had grown stronger, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude that he had been by her side through it all. As the clock ticked closer to 5 p.m., Sarah made her way to the cafe they had agreed to meet at. It wasn't the first time they had met there to talk about work, but this time felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. When she arrived, Dwayne was already waiting at their usual table, his smile instantly putting her at ease. "Hey," Sarah said, sliding into the seat across from him. "What's going on? You seemed excited in your text." Dwayne leaned forward, his eyes glinting with excitement. "You're not going to believe this, but I got a call from the company's board today. They want to offer you the position of Vice President of Operations." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, what? Are you serious? VP?" "Yeah," Dwayne said, his grin widening. "It's official. They've been watching you for a while, and they've seen how much you've grown since everything went down with Robert. They know you're ready for this. And honestly, Sarah, I couldn't think of anyone more deserving." "I don't even know what to say," Sarah finally replied, still processing the news. "I've worked so hard, but I never thought this would happen." "You've earned it," Dwayne said, his voice filled with pride. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, but you've proven time and time again that you can handle whatever comes your way. You're a natural leader, Sarah. You've got this." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Dwayne. I wouldn't have made it through this without you." He reached across the table, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You didn't make it through just because of me. You made it through because you're strong, and you never gave up on yourself." Sarah let out a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. This promotion was everything she had worked for, but it was also the beginning of a new set of challenges. As VP, she would have even more responsibility on her shoulders, more decisions to make, more people to lead, and more pressure to succeed. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt ready. She had faced her fears, confronted the truth, and learned to lean on others for support. Now, she was ready to take on the world. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's transition into her new role was nothing short of transformative. She found herself stepping into a leadership position that required not only vision and strategy but also the ability to inspire and motivate her team. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when she questioned her ability to handle the weight of the responsibilities. But with each challenge, she found her footing. The company began to see a positive shift in the team's morale, and Sarah's leadership was already making an impact. She wasn't just focused on results, she was focused on creating an environment where her team could thrive, where they felt valued and heard. This was the kind of leadership she had always dreamed of, one that fostered collaboration, trust, and growth. As Sarah continued to climb the ranks in her career, she realized that the journey she had been on wasn't just about the destination. It was about the people she met along the way, the lessons she learned, and the strength she had discovered within herself. She had been tested in ways she never thought possible, but she had emerged stronger, more capable, and more determined than ever before. And with the future ahead of her, Sarah knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. As Sarah settled into her new role as Vice President of Operations, she began to realize that the road ahead would be filled with moments that would test her judgment, decision-making, and ability to manage not just the work but the lives of those who trusted her leadership. Each day presented new challenges, whether it was navigating corporate politics, handling demanding clients, or managing the expectations of her team. But as Sarah had learned through the turmoil of the past year, the power of choice could make all the difference. She could choose how to approach each challenge, how to handle the people around her, and how to define her legacy as a leader. It wasn't about simply getting by, it was about creating something meaningful, something lasting. One day, Sarah sat in her office, reviewing a quarterly report that came in. The numbers looked good, better than expected, in fact. But there was a lingering issue that kept coming up in meetings. Several of her colleagues had raised concerns about the company's internal processes, citing inefficiency and an overload of administrative tasks that slowed productivity. The issue wasn't new, but it had reached a tipping point. Sarah could feel the tension building. Everyone was looking to her for a solution. In her new position, she had the power to make sweeping changes, but she also knew that implementing new processes would require buy-in from every level of the company. The decisions she made now would set the tone for how her leadership was perceived moving forward. She leaned back in her chair, contemplating her options. She could push through the changes quickly, make bold decisions, and risk alienating some of her colleagues. Or, she could take a more cautious approach, work with her team to implement gradual improvements, and build consensus. Both paths held risks, but Sarah knew she had to be strategic. The last thing she wanted was for her team to lose faith in her ability to lead. After a moment of contemplation, Sarah picked up the phone and dialed Dwayne's number. She had always trusted his judgment, and she needed his insight now more than ever. "Hey, Sarah. What's up?" Dwayne's voice was warm, but she could hear the faint sound of papers shuffling in the background. He was clearly in the middle of something, but he still made time for her. "I've got a problem," Sarah said, diving straight to the point. "The company's internal processes are a mess. I need to make a call on whether we overhaul everything right now or take it slow and make gradual changes. I'm torn, Dwayne. What do you think?" Dwayne paused for a moment, likely weighing the situation in his mind before offering his advice. "Well, it sounds like you've got two options, but what's the bigger picture here? Are these processes the main thing holding the company back, or is it just one piece of a larger puzzle?" "That's the thing," Sarah replied, her frustration creeping into her voice. "They're a big part of the issue, but they're also a symptom of a larger problem. I think the team needs more clarity, and we need more consistency in how we operate. But if I push for immediate changes, it might create chaos. If I go slow, we risk losing momentum. It feels like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place." "I get it," Dwayne said, his voice calm and measured. "But this isn't just about the process, it's about how you bring your team along with you. They're looking to you for direction. You have to decide whether you're leading from the front or guiding them through it step by step. Sometimes, the best change comes from involving everyone in the process, so they feel like part of the solution." Sarah let his words sink in. Dwayne was right. It wasn't about making decisions in a vacuum, it was about making sure everyone felt heard, understood, and involved in the process. Change, especially at the scale Sarah was considering, needed to be a team effort. "Thanks, Dwayne," she said, feeling more grounded. "I needed that perspective. I'm going to take the time to involve the team in this. We'll figure it out together." "I'm sure you will," Dwayne replied with a smile in his voice. "You've got this, Sarah." The next morning, Sarah gathered her senior leadership team for a meeting. She had already decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of making decisions on her own, she would bring everyone into the conversation. She wanted their input, their ideas, and their buy-in. If they were going to make these changes, they needed to feel ownership over the process. "All right, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady and confident. "We all know that the company has been facing some challenges with our internal processes. We've been talking about improving efficiency for a while now, and it's time we take action. But I don't want to make these changes in isolation. I want to hear from each of you about what's working, what isn't, and how we can improve as a team." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed her words. Sarah could see the looks of surprise on some faces. She knew that many of them were expecting her to lay out a plan and demand that it be executed immediately. But this approach was different. She wasn't just asking for their feedback, she was inviting them into the decision-making process. One by one, the team began to speak up. Ideas flowed freely, some practical, some more ambitious. They discussed everything from streamlining workflows to improving communication channels to investing in new technology that could automate routine tasks. What stood out to Sarah, however, was the enthusiasm that came from each person. They weren't just offering solutions, they were fully invested in the outcome. By the end of the meeting, Sarah had a clearer sense of the path forward. The team was on board with making changes, but they wanted to take it step by step. Together, they would prioritize the most pressing issues and tackle them one at a time. It wasn't going to be quick, but Sarah felt confident that it would be sustainable. The key was patience and collaboration. As Sarah left the meeting, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about making the right decision, it was about making the best decision for everyone involved. She had the power to lead, but true leadership meant empowering others and making them feel like they were part of something bigger. Dwayne's words echoed in her mind as she returned to her office. She was no longer just reacting to situations or pushing for change for the sake of it. She was actively shaping the company's future, and she was doing it with her team by her side. Sarah's ability to make tough decisions, even when they weren't always the easiest or quickest solutions, was what would define her as a leader. The choices she made now would set the course for the future, but they would also shape the relationships she had with the people who trusted her. Sarah sat in her office, staring at the large window that looked out over the bustling city. She was used to the view by now, but today, something about it felt different. The weight of the decisions she had made in recent weeks seemed to hang over her, and she was feeling the pressure more than ever. Her approach to leadership, where collaboration and transparency were at the forefront, was paying off, but the real challenges were just beginning. As the company made strides toward improving internal processes, Sarah was noticing a shift in the dynamics within the office. Not everyone was on board with the changes she was pushing for. Some employees were hesitant. They had grown comfortable with the old way of doing things, and they weren't eager to embrace the new initiatives. Sarah had anticipated some resistance, but it still stung when it came from people she had trusted. She'd always known that leadership required making tough decisions, but today, it felt like those decisions were starting to alienate some of her closest colleagues. It was in moments like this when Sarah felt the true weight of her role. The pressure to not only succeed but to succeed in a way that benefited everyone. She couldn't afford to be swayed by the people who resisted change, but she also couldn't ignore their concerns. They were a part of her team, and she owed it to them to listen, to understand where they were coming from. The phone buzzed on her desk, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from Dwayne. "You good? You looked a bit off in the last meeting." Sarah smiled slightly at the message. Dwayne had a knack for picking up on things, even from a distance. She quickly typed a reply. "I'm fine. Just dealing with some pushback on the changes. It's harder than I thought." Dwayne's response came almost immediately. "I know it's tough. But you've got this. Take a step back if you need to. Don't lose sight of why you started this journey in the first place." His words resonated with her, but as Sarah thought about them, she realized he was right. She couldn't let herself get bogged down by resistance. If she truly believed in the changes she was making, she had to stand firm. It was time to have a conversation. A real one. The following morning, Sarah called an all-staff meeting. She had spent the night thinking about what she would say, and she was determined to approach the conversation with honesty, humility, and a clear sense of purpose. She needed to remind her team of the bigger picture, the reason they were all working so hard toward the changes in the first place. As the team gathered in the conference room, Sarah took her place at the front, her posture confident but her heart racing. She could feel the tension in the room. Some faces were supportive, but others were unsure, perhaps even resentful of the recent changes. This was her moment to address it head-on. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady but full of intent. "I know that many of you have concerns about the direction we're heading. I can feel the pushback, and I want to acknowledge that. Change is hard. It's uncomfortable. It shakes things up, and it challenges the status quo. But it's necessary if we're going to grow." She paused, making eye contact with different members of the team as she spoke. "When I took this role, I made a commitment to myself and to all of you that we would not settle for mediocrity. We wouldn't just get by, and we wouldn't accept a work culture that didn't allow everyone to thrive. That means making tough decisions. And, yes, sometimes those decisions will not be popular. But they will always be made with the best interests of this company and each one of you in mind." There was a moment of silence as the team absorbed her words. Sarah could see some of them nodding, others still skeptical. She knew she had to do more than just speak, it was time to listen. I want to hear from you, Sarah continued. I don't have all the answers. And I'm not asking you to blindly follow me. What I'm asking for is your trust. What I'm asking for is your feedback. Together, we can make this work. But it will require each and every one of us to be all in. I can't do this alone. For the next hour, Sarah sat back and listened. Her team shared their thoughts on the changes, and some of the concerns they voiced were legitimate. There were fears about the speed of implementation, worries about the impact on their workloads, and doubts about whether the new processes would actually deliver the promised results. Sarah took note of everything, ensuring that each person felt heard. She didn't have all the solutions right then, but she promised them that she would work with them to find answers. She couldn't promise that things would be easy or that there wouldn't be more bumps in the road, but she could promise that she would lead with integrity and that she would always have their backs. When the meeting ended, Sarah felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't a perfect conversation, and not everyone was convinced. But she had made progress. She had shown her team that she wasn't just a figurehead, she was someone who was committed to the company's success, but also to their well-being. That afternoon, Sarah met with Dwayne to debrief. As she sat across from him, she recounted the meeting and the reactions she had received. Sounds like you did exactly what you needed to do, Dwayne said. You stood firm, but you also showed them that you're willing to listen. That's how trust is built. Sarah nodded. I hope so. It's just hard. I want to make things better, but I also don't want to lose anyone along the way. You won't lose them if you continue to show them that you care, Dwayne replied. People follow leaders who are authentic and who have a vision for the future. You've got both. Just stay the course, and remember why you're doing this. You've got what it takes. Sarah took a deep breath. She wasn't naive enough to think that the road ahead would be smooth. There would still be hurdles, tough conversations, and moments of doubt. But with each decision she made, she was strengthening her resolve, and with each step, she was becoming the leader she had always aspired to be. She knew that true leadership wasn't about being liked or avoiding conflict, it was about standing firm in the face of adversity and leading with purpose. And she was ready for whatever came next. As Sarah continued to navigate her role as Vice President of Operations, she realized that her leadership had started to have a ripple effect throughout the company. The changes she had initiated weren't just impacting her immediate team, they were shaping the culture of the entire organization. Employees were beginning to see the difference in the way leadership engaged with them. They were starting to feel more included, more heard, and more empowered to contribute their ideas. It wasn't always easy. The road to change had its bumps, and not every initiative had taken off the way Sarah had hoped. But as time passed, she began to notice subtle signs of progress. People were more engaged in meetings. There was a noticeable shift in the office dynamic, a sense of camaraderie and a growing willingness to take risks. It was in those moments of incremental progress that Sarah found hope. Change didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't come without setbacks, but she was starting to see the fruits of her labor. More importantly, she was beginning to realize that leadership wasn't just about pushing forward with grand ideas. It was about guiding people through the tough times and helping them realize their potential in the process. One particular afternoon, Sarah had a meeting scheduled with the company's senior leadership team. She was eager to hear about the progress of the projects they had been working on, especially those related to the new initiatives she had introduced. When she walked into the room, she was surprised to find Dwayne already seated at the table. "Hey there," Sarah said, offering him a friendly smile as she took her seat. "You're here early." "I couldn't resist," Dwayne replied with a grin. "I thought I'd join in today and see how things are shaping up." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're not just here to keep an eye on me?" Dwayne chuckled. "I'll let you get away with that one for now." The team began to dive into the discussion, and Sarah listened intently as each leader shared their updates. As they went through the reports, it was clear that progress was being made. The changes were slow, but steady. New systems were being implemented, workflows were being streamlined, and the team was beginning to collaborate more effectively. One of the most significant improvements was in communication. The company had long struggled with silos between departments, but now there was a renewed sense of openness. Employees from different teams were starting to collaborate more regularly, and cross-functional meetings had become the norm. It was clear that the changes Sarah had fought so hard for were beginning to stick. But what really stood out to Sarah was something less tangible. There was a shift in the culture. People were starting to take ownership of their work in a way they hadn't before. They were more willing to speak up in meetings, share their ideas, and challenge the status quo. It was a far cry from the complacency that had once defined the company. After the meeting ended, Sarah sat in her office, reflecting on the conversation. She was filled with a sense of accomplishment, but there was still work to be done. The company was on the right track, but she knew it wasn't enough to rest on her laurels. There would always be more to improve, more to learn, and more challenges to face. That evening, as Sarah was preparing to head home, she received a text from Dwayne. "You did it, Sarah. I think we're seeing the beginning of something big here. Don't lose sight of how far you've come." Sarah smiled as she read the message. Dwayne always had a way of putting things into perspective. "Thanks, Dwayne. I know it's just the beginning, but it feels good to see progress." She paused for a moment before typing a final message. "I couldn't have done it without your support. Seriously, you've been my rock through all of this." The response came almost instantly. "I'm just happy to see you thriving. You've earned every bit of success that's coming your way." As Sarah locked her phone and prepared to leave for the day, she couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. There were still plenty of obstacles to overcome, and there would be times when it felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. But she was no longer afraid of the challenges. In fact, she welcomed them. She had grown into the leader she had always hoped to be, someone who could lead with empathy, confidence, and a commitment to doing what was right. And as the ripple effect of her leadership spread throughout the company, she knew that the foundation they were building together would lead to even greater success in the future. The next morning, as Sarah walked into the office, she was greeted by one of her team members, Clara. Clara had been one of the employees who had initially been resistant to the changes Sarah was pushing for, but over time, Clara had come around and was now one of the strongest advocates for the new direction. "Hey, Sarah," Clara said with a wide smile. "I just wanted to say thanks again for bringing us into the process. I've seen a huge difference in how we're all working together. It's honestly been such a game changer for me." Sarah smiled warmly. "You're very welcome, Clara. It means a lot to hear that. But really, it's all of us. We're in this together." Clara nodded, her expression sincere. "I know. But I think you really helped us see the bigger picture. A lot of people were afraid of change, but now, they're starting to embrace it. You're leading us to something better." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude and pride. This was what leadership was all about. It wasn't just about driving change, it was about bringing people along on the journey and helping them realize that change didn't have to be something to fear. As Sarah walked to her office, she realized that the ripple effect she had set into motion wasn't just about company processes or efficiency, it was about the people. The culture she was building wasn't just a reflection of the systems she was implementing. It was a reflection of the values she held dear: collaboration, trust, and the unwavering belief that people were capable of greatness when given the right tools and support. The journey was far from over. But Sarah knew one thing for sure: they were on the right path. The air in Sarah's office was thick with anticipation. The company had made significant strides over the past several months, but today, everything felt different. The culmination of months of hard work, difficult decisions, and countless challenges had led to this moment, an important meeting with the board of directors. If this meeting went well, Sarah's leadership would be solidified. If not, all of the progress they had made could be at risk. She had been preparing for weeks. The slides were ready, the financial reports were compiled, and the key talking points had been rehearsed 100 times. But Sarah knew that this meeting wouldn't just be about numbers. It would be about proving that the changes she had implemented were not only necessary but that they were already paying off. It was her chance to show the board that she had what it took to lead the company into the future. Sarah's phone buzzed on her desk, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Dwayne. "You got this, Sarah. Show them what you've been building. You've already made a difference, now it's time to make sure they see it too." Her heart skipped a beat. Dwayne had always been there to support her, even in the toughest of times. His unwavering belief in her had been a constant source of strength. "Thanks, Dwayne. I couldn't have done it without you." She stared at the message for a moment longer before taking a deep breath. She had worked hard to get here. The company had come so far, and now it was time to push for the final piece, their collective future. As Sarah walked into the boardroom, she could feel the weight of the moment. The members of the board were seated around a large table, their faces serious, but their eyes curious. These were the people who had the power to shape the company's future, and she knew this meeting would be her chance to prove that her leadership was worth the investment. "Good afternoon, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady but filled with purpose. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. I know we've had some challenging months, but we've also made remarkable progress. I'm here to show you not just the numbers, but the tangible improvements we've made as a team. We're stronger, more efficient, and most importantly, we're more unified than ever before." She clicked a button on her laptop, and the first slide appeared on the screen behind her, a graph showing significant improvements in key performance metrics since the introduction of the new processes. "The first area I want to address is our operational efficiency. Since implementing our new systems, we've seen a 25% reduction in operational costs and a 30% increase in productivity. These are numbers we've never seen before. And it's not just about cutting costs, it's about creating a leaner, more agile organization that's ready to adapt to the ever-changing market demands." The board members exchanged glances, clearly impressed. Sarah could see that they were beginning to warm up to her presentation, but she knew that the real test would come when they saw the next slide. She clicked again, and the next slide appeared, a chart showing employee engagement and retention rates. "This is where I'm most proud," Sarah continued, her voice softer but filled with conviction. "When I took on this role, I promised to prioritize our people. We've made significant strides in improving morale, and as a result, our employee engagement has increased by 40%. We've also reduced turnover by 15%, which, as you know, is a huge cost-saving benefit. But more than that, it means we've created a work culture where people want to stay and contribute." A few board members nodded in approval, but Sarah could see one of them, Greg, frowning slightly. Greg had always been the most skeptical of her changes. He was known for his hard-nosed approach to business and his reluctance to embrace the new direction she had taken the company. "Sarah," Greg said, his tone polite but pointed, "I see the numbers, and I can appreciate the improvements. But how do you plan to ensure that this momentum continues? You've made a lot of changes in a short period of time. Are we at risk of overextending ourselves?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the question she had been anticipating. Greg was always going to challenge her, and she needed to be ready with a clear, confident response. "Great question, Greg," she said, maintaining eye contact with him. "I agree that we need to be cautious of overextending ourselves. But we've taken a very deliberate approach to the changes we've implemented. Every initiative has been rolled out in phases, with feedback loops built in to make sure we're constantly evaluating and adjusting as needed. And, as I mentioned earlier, we've focused on improving employee engagement because a motivated, committed workforce is our greatest asset. We're not just implementing systems, we're empowering people to lead and innovate within those systems." Greg nodded slowly but didn't press further. Sarah could tell that he was still cautious, but she had made her case. Now, it was time to bring it home. "The last thing I want to share with you is our vision for the future," Sarah said, clicking to the next slide. "We're not done yet. This is just the beginning. Over the next year, we're going to continue refining our processes, but we're also going to focus on expanding into new markets and investing in cutting-edge technology that will keep us ahead of the competition. The foundation we've laid is strong, and I believe we are positioned to take on even more ambitious goals."